Unhappy marriages. Unhappy marriages. How do you deal with unhappy marriages? Now, the reason this is interesting is because most of you know I only got married last year. I haven't even made it to my 1-year anniversary. And I'm preaching on marriage. Yay. Now, I hope that what I'm going to say tonight is right and accurate for those of you who are more experienced. I think it's biblical. I think it's accurate based on what I have observed in people's lives, what I've observed in my own life, conversations I've had, discussions I've had with people. And so if you're in this room and you have never dealt with an unhappy marriage, and you're not in an unhappy marriage, and you will never be in an unhappy marriage, you just critique me, okay? The rest of you, some of you might be married, and you're really interested in this. Some of you aren't married, but you might be someday. You might want to listen to this. And the rest of you, well, you know your friends have unhappy marriages, so you should listen so you can give advice to them. Okay? Just to give you a taste, my personality is very analytical and critical, and it works that way. It's very easy to become negative, but how it works is it pulls ideas apart and examines everything from every angle that I can think of, and some that I can't think of. And so when I was dating Heidi, I was pulling apart the scenario from all different directions. Is this girl right for me? Should I marry her? Should I date her? How does this work? Do we actually match up? Do we relate well? Do we communicate right? All these things, and I'm asking myself, and then I got engaged to her. And I'm still asking these questions. Is this right? I've still got a little bit of time. I don't want to put her in an awkward situation. Don't want to put me in an awkward situation. I don't want to make the wrong decision. And I go through and go through. Then I get married. And some days the questions still happen. Did I make the right choice? Did she make the right choice? Why am I in this situation? How did I get myself in this situation? What if I made a mistake? What if I married the wrong person? Now, I know that those of you who have been married or are married have never, ever even thought those questions, right? You ask those questions. Marriage sometimes is unhappy. And just to name a few specifics, sometimes marriage is unhappy or rough or tough or just difficult because money problems. It can be all kinds of things. Whether it's you're running low on money and you don't know what to do with it, and so you're both really stressed about it. It can be you've got one person or both of you are really big spenders, and you're frustrated that they're spending money on things they shouldn't be spending money on. Maybe it's a situation where they're not taking the work they should be, and so they're not bringing in income, and you have arguments about who should have the right to spend what money because of who brings in what. And you've got these conflicts that stem from this stress over money and resources. Now, another reason might be you feel lonely in the relationship. And that can be all kinds of things, from you don't feel like they're paying attention to you, you don't feel like they care about you, you don't feel like you're a priority, or it could be that you don't have any friends. You really just feel alone in the situation where you've got this single solid relationship in your life, and the person that you're supposed to be depending on isn't really making you a priority, and you just feel really lonely. Sometimes without your spouse even knowing. Then there's the situation where it's a matter of lacking romance. Now, again, I know none of you have ever lacked any romance in your life, and that can be you guys don't. Well, put it in terms of Swayze's would understand. You guys don't read anymore. That means sex. Okay. You guys aren't doing that anymore. Maybe you guys don't bother going on dates anymore. You just don't feel special to the person. And maybe you're past that point in your life, whatever, but you just don't find that you sit and look in each other's eyes anymore. You just lack that. And so you feel like you're created this disconnect, and that creates a little bit of frustration and unhappiness. And then there's the very, very common one of you've got communication issues, and you either feel like they never talk to you, they ignore what you're saying, or whenever you do talk, it ends up in an argument or more confusion. And you just don't seem to be able to get along, and so you either try to avoid conversations because they always end badly, or you enter into conversations and leave them confused and upset. These things happen. How many of you married here can relate to at least one of those? Okay, those of you who are not married or newly married, look around the room. These are common things, okay? These are common things. And what I want to get to tonight is what's the source of these problems? What causes unhappy marriages? Now, I want to take a little bit of an aside. I'm not really dealing with abuse and adulterous issues tonight, okay? Those are kind of side issues that I don't have time to get into. If you're in an abusive relationship, I can't advise you to leave them, but I can advise you to use tough love and maybe create a little bit of distance, okay? Because that's not okay. Abuse is not okay. If you're in a situation where your spouse is sleeping with somebody else, is cheating on you, actually Jesus said that was the only grounds for divorce, because in that situation, there's already been a rupture of the relationship. The marriage has already been broken and severed. And so those two things are not okay. You want to deal with those, that's a different series, that's a different topic. But as for the rest of us who might not be in those categories, there are three main components that cause unhappy marriages: priorities, commitment, and communication. I'm a good Wesleyan here tonight, 3-point sermon. Priorities, commitment, communication. Now, priorities. That has to do with exactly what is first thing you're going to take care of on your list. I want a new car. I want a baby. Priority conflict. I want a new TV. I want a cat. Priority conflict. I want to go to church. I want to go to the racetrack. Priority conflict. I want to save money. I want to spend money. Priority conflict. And so when your priorities aren't lined up, you end up with this friction and these conflicts and these issues. And until those priorities are aligned, you're going to have those issues. You might ignore it. You might let these things go. But as long as the priorities aren't lined up, there's going to be problems. Commitment. Without the commitment side of things, you enter a really terrifying realm. Okay? Commitment is one of those things that if you don't have it, you always have an out. You always have an escape route. You don't ever actually have to deal with anything. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and I am not committed to that relationship, when it gets hard, what am I going to do? I'm going to leave. I don't have to stay. I don't have to take this. This isn't interesting anymore. Sure, it might be valuable for me to fight through it, but it's just not worth it. Not worth it. And so that leaves you in a situation where you never actually deal with problems. The other thing that it does is it creates this terrifying situation because you don't know when the other person is going to do the same thing. They've always got an out as well. When are they going to leave? When are they going to say that's enough? When are they going to push away and say, this isn't worth it to me anymore? And what that results in is in this relationship of fear, because you can't be honest. You can't be open. You can't be sincere. And you really can't share what's going on and what is deepest in your heart because you're scared that you're going to push them to the place where they're going to leave. And you don't want them to bring up anything too much because then that's going to push you to the point where it's not worth it and you're going to leave. And so you're never honest. You don't trust each other. You never deal with the things. And you never stick around to deal with the things because you always have an out. And the third piece, communication. Ich nicht sprechen Sie Deutsch. What did I just say? I don't speak German. Let me tell you a story. My brother and I went to see AC/DC in Germany. Not my idea. He wanted to go. We went to Europe. He wanted to go see it. Really interesting show. We go to the hotel in Germany. And somebody along the trip there had told him, when you get to the hotel, go to the front desk and just say, Ich sprechen Sie Deutsch. And he's like, oh, great. And he said, that means I don't speak German. So he went up and he said it. And the girl looked at him and said, Das gut. And he's like, what did I just say? I don't. She said, you just said you speak German. Because there's one little word in there. It's Ich nie sprechen Sie Deutsch. Not Ich sprechen Sie Deutsch. There's the nie. Without the nie, he said, I speak German. When he meant to say, I don't speak German. Language is important. And if you're not speaking the language of your spouse, it's going to get confusing. And so if you're not speaking in a way that communicates with them, or they're not speaking a language that communicates with you, you're not going to understand each other. And some situations, there is absolutely no communication. And then you can't deal with anything. And then there's situations where it's bad communication, and when you talk, you actually make things worse because you're fighting and you're yelling, and it creates more problems. And then there's the situation where it's just miscommunication, where there's lots of misunderstanding, and that causes confusion. And really, if you look at it, most of the problems in marriages can be boiled down to an issue of priorities, an issue of commitment, or an issue of communication. Now, if you look at the Bible, this is what it says in Ephesians chapter 5. It says, submitting to one another out of reverence for Christ, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Amen. Preach it. Come on, man. Let me hear it. Okay. Some of the men were silent because they've learned when to shut up. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submit to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he may sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy, so that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. What do we get from this passage? Well, if we look at it, we see that in this verse it says, therefore man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one. What's that? Commitment. There's no out. You've left everything else behind. You're one. Commitment. If you look early on in the passage, you see that you're supposed to, wives are supposed to do what? Submit. And husbands are supposed to love. Love like Christ loves the church, which is almost harder, well, it is harder, than just submitting and respecting. Because if you recall, Christ actually suffered and died for the church. And so Paul is saying in this passage that husbands, you are supposed to be willing to suffer and die to take care of your wife. And so that's a matter of priorities. And then if you look at it, he says, in the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one who ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. Now, that verse points to something. Basically, he's saying you need to love others like you love yourself. Treat others like you want to be treated. Golden rule. I think we can boil that down to communication. Now, I don't think it only means communication, but I think it points to communication. Because how many of you like understanding situations? Yep. Now, if you like understanding situations, don't you think your spouse would like to understand? Stephanie's over here laughing. I don't know why, but I'm going to keep talking. And so if you deal with your priorities, if it's a matter of priorities, what you do is you put Christ first, and then you put your spouse through this reciprocal back and forth relationship of I'm submitting and respecting and I'm loving. And you have those two as your top priority. So you have Christ, both priority is aligned. Then you're looking out for each other. Priority is aligned. And this morning we talked about harmony, and that creates harmony. And then thirdly, all the other details in life. All the other details are dealt with by doing what Christ wants, taking care of your marriage, and the rest of it, all those little details, you figure out through those two, defining everything, but also through discussion. You talk about it. But in order to be able to talk about it and figure out all your priority issues, you have to be committed to the relationship. You have to have no way out. You have to say, not just, I am committed to being married to you, but I am committed to this relationship. Which means that when bad things happen and conflicts happen, you can't just leave the conversation and forget about the issue. Because it's not just, I am going to stay married to you on paper, but I am going to work through the issue because it's the relationship that I am committed to. And when you are in a committed relationship, you don't have an out. You can say what is actually on your heart. And you can trust that they can say what is on their heart. And you can actually get down to business. Once you've got those two things in place, then you can start dealing with the communication side of things. And like we said, if you like understanding, they like understanding, now you have this framework for figuring out how to actually communicate. You ask questions. You listen. You say, do you understand what I'm saying? Well, I think you're saying this. Okay, that's not what I meant at all. This is what I'm saying. And it becomes less about being right and getting your point across, and more about you making sure that you understand and helping the other person understand. And so it becomes less of a battle and more of a searching process to figure out what is actually being said and what is going on. Priorities, commitment, communication. So, how that affects your money problems? Well, you deal with your money through your priorities. You put Christ at the top. You do what Christ wants you to do with your money. You take care of the needs of your spouse. And then you talk about the rest of the issues. And you can because you're committed and you're working through proper communication. What about being alone? If you're alone in your marriage and you feel really alone, well, again, that's dealt with. Priorities, commitment, communication. You make each other a priority. You know that neither one is going to leave because you're committed to it, and so that creates safety. But you also know that there are needs that you can't give each other. Okay? Heidi likes girly things. She likes pink and dresses and scrapbooking and decorating and weird lipsticks and nails and stuff. So you know what I do? I understand her needs because we've communicated. And so you know what I do? I basically say, go get some friends. Which is completely healthy. Because I can't give her that aspect of what she needs. And guys, the guys need guy friends, and girls need girlfriends, and married couples need married friends, because there are certain needs there that your one relationship was never built to sustain. That puts a lot of strain on one relationship. And when you have those priorities set and you understand each other's needs, you understand that you need other people. You can't be alone. And that helps a lot deal with the loneliness, which then in turn deals with the romance issue. Because the romance issue isn't really a romance issue, it's an intimacy issue. You don't solve the romance issue by forcing it. That just makes things more awkward. But if you've got your priorities set, and you're finding that you are unified in your priorities by aligning them with Christ, and then you're meeting each other's needs and giving each other freedom to have friends and to have other people that they can talk to, that releases a lot of strain, that allows you to communicate better. You'll find that just naturally you end up being attracted to the other person, even if they're getting uglier. Because it's based on this intimacy, where you're not expecting something from them that they can't give you, and you're communicating, and you're trying to communicate, and you're trying to understand each other, and that builds a closer relationship, which then creates intimacy, which then creates this romance. And as far as communication problems, a lot of these communication problems, if you guys have the right priorities, there won't be, one, you'll be able to understand each other a little bit better. Two, you won't have as many discussions about central hard issues. And if you're committed, you can be honest. Communication really comes from that honesty and that ability or that attempt to see each other from each other's point of view. And so, if you deal with your priorities, you deal with your commitment, and you deal with your communication, you can get through just about every problem there is in marriage. Now, how many of you say I'm wrong? Yes. Okay. This is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do tonight. Well, first I want you to tell me what the three things are. Okay. Priorities, commitment, communication. This is what I want you to do. I want you to have a discussion, those of you who are married, I want you to have a discussion about those three topics with your spouse this week. Some of you having communication issues are not looking forward to that. But seriously, I want you to have a conversation about those 3 points. Now, if you're not married, if you're not married, because there's only 2 categories, the married and the not married. If you're not one of those married people, I want you to have a conversation about that, either with someone that maybe you're dating or engaged to, or maybe pass that advice along to one of your married friends that might find it useful, or just talk to one of your friends about your future outlook in your life and how you want those 3 things to be a key to your relationship. Basically, I want you to have a conversation about this one way or another. Priorities, commitment, and communication.